Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, June 11th, 2020. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that the SCRD is gathered on the traditional territory of the Seashelt and Squamish First Nations. First item on our agenda is adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions or changes that anybody would like to make? Any deletions? Always welcome deletions. Director Seegers?
We have an amended agenda.
We do have an amended agenda. My apologies. I've actually got the previous printout. Yeah, so we have a late addition to item H. Is there anything else? No?
I'll move adoption of the amended agenda.
Thank you. Seconder? Seconded. All those in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex A, we have a presentation from Naomi Fleshout and April Struthers, Sunshine Coast Together project. Turn it over to you guys.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for having us here today, and we're excited. I've already spoken to a number of you about the project, but I'm excited to share more with the rest of you and to see if we might be entering into a region-wide partnership. That could be great. So I just want to give you a sense of what we're going to cover today in our presentation, talk a little bit about social connectedness and why it's important, because it really is a key driver behind this project and a key avenue towards building community resilience. Talk a little bit about the Resilient Coast project itself and our experience in our community, strengthening social connectedness and resilience. Then, of course, tell you a bit about the broad strokes of what the Sunshine Coast Together project looks like. It's our latest effort, and how the SCRD can become a project partner with support from the Plan H Healthy Communities Community Connectedness stream. Then we also, of course, have April Struthers here. She's a project partner, and she's going to cover a little bit about the social mapping component, a really fundamental component of our project, and also speak about how inclusion and anti-racism components are going to be integrated into the project. So, and then of course, we're both here happy to answer any questions and would love to hear ideas you have as well. So social connectedness, as I said, it's a real driver. It's kind of the fundamental sort of approach of Resilient Coast to build social connectedness as an avenue towards resilience. And it's also, one of the reasons why Vancouver Coastal Health is often involved in our projects is because social connectedness is recognized as a key determinant of community health and well-being. And research actually shows that a lack of social connectedness is a greater detriment to health than smoking and high blood pressure, while people who live in socially connected neighborhoods actually report greater quality of life, health, sense of safety, and generally are more prepared for emergencies. So unfortunately, the research is also showing excuse me, that social isolation is on the rise in Canada. And this is, of course, a fact that's exacerbated right now by what we're going through with the pandemic and the requirements to be physically distant. So helping community members build and maintain social connectedness really seems to be more important than ever. Now, Resilient Coast, our mission is to help build community resilience by supporting and strengthening social connections at the neighborhood level, sharing useful tools and resources and advocating for resilient community design and encouraging cross-sectoral collaboration in order to accomplish that. Since 2017, we've run 2 pilot programs here on the coast, Resilient Neighborhoods programs, and we've supported 17 neighborhood gatherings, neighborhood gatherings and projects involving over 700 residents from Garden Bay to Gibsons. So both of these pilot programs, actually, we did partner with the SCRD, first by receiving a grant and aid to help our first attempt get off the ground, and then also, again, with a Plan H grant at the end of 2017 for our 2018 program that was based on helping us work with building resilient neighborhoods out of Victoria that had been our mentors throughout this project. So earlier this year, we were focused on planning a social connectedness and resilience forum with support from Vancouver Coastal Health for planners, developers, facility managers, and others to look at how we can nurture social connectedness and resilience, specifically in the design and use of the built environment, because that's another fundamental piece. Is we have to sort of create the groundwork for people to be able to experience good connections and to share resources with each other. Of course, in light of the global pandemic, public forums aren't the best thing to be planning right now. And so we decided to pivot our use of resources and the VCH grant to be responsive to our current community needs. And that's how the Sunshine Coast Together project was born. So the purpose of it is to amplify the efforts that we're making to encourage and support neighborhood level connections, neighborhood networks, mutual aid networks, to help us adapt and enhance our program, our offerings, and our resources to be responsive to these times, and also to undertake social mapping of our community's emergency response with the goals of seeing how grassroots and informal networks fit into our community's sort of resilience ecosystem, how they're integrated or how they might not be integrated, and how we can build on that in the future. And I think it's a really interesting time right now. We have a unique opportunity to learn from the incredible response our community has displayed and been really effective in rolling out. See how, what can we learn from that, and how can we improve on it, as we know, we're facing potential future waves of the virus, but also we're in a time of climate change and a lot of challenges to our resilience. So I'm really happy that we have that as a major component of the project. So though we have a great start, we've got expertise we've developed, we have incredible relationships with mentors, people who've been working on these kind of issues around connectedness and resilience for decades. We have an extensive toolbox filled with, inspiring examples that help people see how they can build greater connection. And we have on and offline tools and resources. Though we have all this, we also need support and partnerships to really be able to offer an effective coast-wide program. And that's why we're interested in offering the invitation to partner on the Plan H Community Connectedness stream of the Healthy Communities Grant Program. So the purpose of this funding is to support communities to foster a sense of belonging and connection and cohesion, and to actually combat the negative long-term health outcomes that are associated with loneliness and isolation, and that many of us are, kind of identifying as a unique need right now with the isolation that is resulting, especially for vulnerable populations, because of the pandemic response. So specifically, the fund helps local governments to work with health authorities, community partners in multi-sectoral collaborations to achieve these ends. And that's why I'm here this morning to invite you to consider partnering with Resilient Coast and the Vancouver Coastal Health Sunshine Coast Healthy Communities team on the Sunshine Coast Together project. We have, as I said, we've spoken to some of you. We've made presentations already to the town of Gibsons and the district of Sechelt. We're reaching out as well to the Sechelt Nation, and looking at really moving as the SCRD and many of you are focused on moving beyond, areas on a map that say this is area E, this is area A, but instead looking at a real region-wide approach of how we can support all of our citizens in building greater social networks and networks of mutual aid. So with that, I'll hand it over to April to talk a little bit more about the social mapping component, and again, how her anti-racism work also fits into this, because inclusivity is a big part of what we're trying to build here.
Thanks, Naomi, and thanks everybody for inviting us here. I work in the field of social determinants of health, and of making the background and the infrastructure that you can feel in your community but not see, making that more visible. And that's where social mapping comes in. We're all part of networks. All of you in your positions wouldn't be where you are without having sturdy and extensive community networks. what a social map does is just take a look at all the possibilities for how people connect and show that in a visual form. And from that, you can make decisions about where you want to engage other networks, where the energy and the community power and capacity building already is, and how it is that you want to go forward intentionally to create either a wider reach for what you're already doing, or to pull people who are doing extraordinary things into the purview of what your particular initiative is. So we are proposing to do some sort of overall look at all the systems that exist for connection already on the coast as much as we can at lots of different levels, and then deciding how do we put things together in a real effective way. We know that will more intentionally build social capacity. And we know, and research shows, that social capacity counters all the bad things that can develop, like ageism, racism, all kinds of violence, and so on. We know in order to withstand those and to make sure that they don't kind of bloom in the wrong way or have sort of social infection, that we need to have strong social capacity and strong ways of being able to counter stuff at the neighborhood level, at the community level, and at the regional level. Now, there's already been a certain amount of work done over the last 8 years on the coast for anti-racism and promotion of the good social capacity building. We do have a community protocol which has been developed, which we will roll into this project. And the exciting thing about that is that service providers and local government know about the protocol. Some community associations do, but regular citizens and, well, my neighbors, for instance, don't know about that yet. This is a perfect way to be able to bring that into conversations and to have people decide what it is that they can be doing to either notice incidents that we don't want happening in our community, or to be able to stand up safely against things they witness, or figuring out how to put together the assets that already exist to build anti-racist activities everywhere all the time. So we are providing the protocol to this project and a way of sort of enacting it. We are also going to use an equity lens and use some asset building and audit systems to have a look at how equitable are we. How can we move that needle just a little bit with this kind of program? How do we do it in a way that's invitational for people and doesn't feel like people are being asked to be politically correct or being punished if they're not acting in a certain way? And so we think that having the big map will help to pull people into the picture, help to illuminate the picture that's there, and help us to know how to use the tools and the assets that we have and that are yet to be discovered to cause more connection. So it's a kind of a logical social science approach to stuff which is already out there or can be developed.
Great. Thank you for that. I certainly can understand where you're trying to come from, and even on the neighborhood level, like I know all my neighbors, but I only know my neighbors because I've known them since I was a kid here. It's an old neighborhood. It's all the same families living here. I know a lot of people that just don't know their neighbors, even right next door to them. So, Director Ties.
Well, thank you for your presentation. And I personally believe that what you guys are trying to do is exactly what we need here on the coast. It's one of the reasons I moved to the coast. It's one of the reasons I decided to run for office, and it's the community that's created roots and kept me here and wants me to stay here, and as we watch cities grow and the smaller communities dwindle, it is those that can create this sense of community and cohesiveness that will actually be able to flourish in the long run. And so I think it is crucial that we have initiatives like this, and I'm in full support.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting opportunity, and I realize that you can't do everything on just one grant, and that at least some of the focus needs to be on COVID, because we are likely to have a second wave coming at us. But I've really become aware since I was elected of how many situations there are out in our community that we don't have any method to deal with. They're not of a level for calling the police. They don't really fall under bylaw, but there are neighborhood disputes and people who are feeling unsafe in the community. And so any thoughts that you have through this project about how we can better resolve those kind of disputes would be really helpful.
Thank you for that. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Just want to talk about the funding a little bit, just to, so the regional approach is 3 times 5,000 per local government. VCH is putting in 5,000. There's you're waiting for something on racism funding. And I guess I'm particularly interested in the SIGD, the Sechelt, and how reaching out is working, and doesn't seem like an all one coast if the Sechelt are not involved.
Can I respond to that, or?
For sure.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so we're really in the beginning stages of reaching out with the Sechelt Nation, although Darnelda has been a big piece of pulling together some conversations around this and helping introduce our project to, people who are involved with the Community Task Force and others. And so from my understanding, Mayor Seegers has actually had some conversations with the Sechelt Nation on this, and I'm following up with one of their staff. But really what we're hoping for is to see, all local governments represented on this application as joint partners in it, and to then ask, for the maximum ask that we can, and see what Vancouver Coastal Health, Plan H can provide, because they only have I think it is 15 of these $5,000 grants to distribute throughout the province. So we don't know exactly how much they might be able to extend to our community, but they have said that, seeing a coordinated region-wide approach is a strength of our application, and that we can consider asking for funds that would have been, had the Sechelt Nation only applied for this grant, or had the town of Gibson's only applied for this grant. So that's certainly our intent, is to make sure that we're all included, and also to work with government staff and councillors to see, how do you want to support and be involved in this project? How do you want to add input? I know you all, and your staff in particular, already have very full plates, but I just want to make sure that it's understood that the best outcomes for this project are that people feel like they can be involved and can help inform us as we go forward, and also benefit from what we learn and what we can communicate about, as Donna says, like what are the mechanisms for helping communities? That's the real fundamental part of this, is if we build these connections and people are better able to support and work with each other, then we have less of a draw on other kind of institutional resources. So we're really excited to share what kind of emerges from that, and what ideas there are, or recommendations there might be, in terms of how local government can better support that at the neighborhood level.
Great. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Let me see, lower my hand here. Whatever, I can't lower my hand. Maybe you could do that for me. So a little while back, this was a conversation. The neighborhood community kind of initiative was a conversation, and through communicating out in the community, I guess it was Chair Pratt who indicated that Naomi had actually been in touch with Director McMahon and Director Ties. So I reached out to her and pulled together a couple of meetings in the community via Zoom with people from the community task force. And I extend the invitation to all the directors here and the various government officials up and down the coast and others who had been involved in this conversation. And some of the community associations in Seashelt, for example, came forward and said, yes, very interested, want to be involved. Some of the community associations said, we already have this, but we don't know that they have that, right? At a government level or a emergency level, we don't know what's out there. So I can see this creating more, but also bringing to light those communities who already have some structure in place that's supporting their community. And then I reached out to Chief Warren Paul, who's just joined us. Hi there. And he's provided context of the Seashelt Nation for this resilient communities conversation. So yes, they will be involved. And as with something like this, grassroots level, we don't know what it's going to look like in each community, and it can be totally different in each community. But it's, I think as government, I think our role to communicate, like get the information out up and down the coast, show that we're behind this, we support this, and give it our blessing. Otherwise, we don't really have much to do with it. Another piece that's come out that I think Naomi and April will be taking advantage of, and the community associations and community groups will be taking advantage of, is some grassroots funding coming out through Vancouver Foundation. So they have made available small micro grants, anywhere from $50 to $500, and they're available for anybody in BC. Doesn't have to be a society. It can be any group that gets together and says, this is what we want to do, and we need a little bit of seed money. That money is available. So there's other supports out there. I think Naomi and April coming forward and spearheading this, given the experience they've got, they actually are in a great position to be able to support those who don't quite know how to do this or are a little hesitant to do this. I think it's the support that will get the grassroots organizational groups happening. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentation. And I look forward to this moving forward.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for our delegation? Director Hiltz.
Thanks. If you would have the role of technology, like I'm looking at, I got 17 squares in front of me. We weren't doing this 6 months ago. How do you see the role of the technology, and can local government support in this technology? Do you see this as a key piece going forward? Like face-to-face is less able. So the role of technology in this connectedness, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I would say that actually is that's what marks this project as different from past projects that we've done, because we've always been focused on bringing people together in face-to-face and actually looking at how we design our communities so that we increase the potential for that level of interaction. So neighbors have the opportunity to bump into each other on our very kind of car-focused coast, where sometimes you might not even ever see people who live beside you if you don't do that intentionally. So that's why we talk about sort of COVID responsive and looking at how people can be feeling even more isolated now in a place where already we have so many sort of infrastructure elements that help us to be more isolated. So to give you an example, well, first of all, looking at when we're encouraging community connectedness, we think of it in these 4 kind of theme categories, and they all have a slightly different focus. But the first one, for example, is gatherings and celebrations, so that people can get to know each other more and meet new neighbors. So what we're going to be promoting is how can you still do that in a time where, you can't have a block party, but what you can have is, a far apart party or, so looking at ways that people could do it physically, but also helping them access tools that, again, yes, are online, that will help them, establish as well as maintain and kind of steward these relationships. So one example is, I'm not sure if you've seen the Coming Together Vancouver application, a website, online app, but it is put out, and I have that in my resource package. There should be a link to that, but that is an application, and it's one of many that has been designed to help communities connect, what they call an ask offer network. So an online way to connect people based on your postal code, so that you're actually connecting people with people who are nearby. And what you can do is, if you have something that you would like to offer, it's like a matchmaking type of tool. And so you put up there, what you can offer. I'm happy to, I go grocery shopping twice a week on these days, and I'm happy to pick up for other people in my neighborhood, for example. And then other people can put up what they need. And then the tool actually uses those sort of algorithms around connecting people based on their postal code to help make those matches. So that's just one example. But that's exactly the kind of thing, like many of us are getting much more savvy about how to use the online environment to maintain our connections and our work obligations. But people need more support to do that as well. So really the main thrust of most of our projects with Resilient Coast are just telling people about the great stories of what others have done and what resources there are out there to help them do something similar. And then they can take and run with that. And a big part of the grant funding is really for our time to work through that with people and be a support for people.
All right. Thank you. Last chance for questions, directors, before we move on. Just being mindful of time. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. And you'll be coming back up again here shortly. Moving on to Annex B.
Thank you.
Nicole Huska, Secret Cove Heights Development. And I turn it over to you.
Thank you for your time today, area directors and staff. Given the lengthy nature of our memorandum that was included in the agenda, right now I just have a short summary, and I don't wish to monopolize too much more of your time. So with that said, imagine it's 4 a.m. someday in the future. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You're woken up by the ground shaking. It lasts for over a minute. When the shaking stops, you take a moment to calm your nerves, and then you reach for your phone. You, the elected officials of the Sunshine Coast, have a job to do. Your mind, which is very aware of our infrastructure risks, starts clicking through the likely disaster that faces us when the sun rises. Downed power lines, broken road and water infrastructure, and tens of thousands of vulnerable coasters all looking for help. Victoria will be overwhelmed addressing our densified urban communities, so outside help isn't coming, at least not for several weeks, and we, on the coast, have enough food for about 4 days. In the face of that inevitable future reality, what are we duty-bound to do? Do we continue to sit here like frogs in a pot, waiting for something to flip the switch? The SCRD Strategic Energy Management Plan acknowledges that there is a need to be a recognition of, but not paralysis from, uncertainty. The density at the core planning models are fundamentally reliant on a continuum of the status quo. While density at the core makes claims of cost efficiencies, capital investment services, such as those in Secret Cove and the Jolly Roger, to name a few, tell a different story. If the last 3 months have taught us anything, we can no longer depend on the status quo to keep us fed and healthy. The provincial and federal governments are increasingly emphasizing the need for community resiliency in order to mitigate, insofar as it's possible, the risks of climate change, potential global unrest, and further pandemics, all of which expose the vulnerability of our long, out-of-region supply lines. The density at core planning models are propped up by these supply lines. Canada imports almost 80% of our food, and the Sunshine Coast grows less than 2% of what we eat. This is not resilient or sustainable or climate friendly. I don't know about you all, but for me, as a mother of 3 daughters, I think about these risks all the time. I see my fellow community members becoming increasingly vulnerable. I watched as low-paid retail has taken first place in our local economy. I see the RV parks, which are popping up everywhere due to gray areas in our OCPs. The RV parks are becoming permanent housing because those same OCPs have created artificial scarcity that's driven up prices to a point where they're not accessible to locals and where the focus on tourism has allowed Airbnbs to consume rental housing. The proposal by Secret Cove Heights for the 46 acres at the end of Stephens Way was developed by coasters for coasters. It's based on the lived experience of myself, the Biddlecombe family, and members of the community from whom we've gathered input over the last 3 years. The proposal is founded on the realities of living and working on the coast and written with the intention of making the best and highest use of what we have here. The 38-page memorandum, which we submitted in response to the staff report, is highly technical. It demonstrates that planning have been incomplete in their analysis of our proposal and have cherry-picked negatives while ignoring the significant and widespread policy justification for what we're proposing. Criticisms of the proposal also rely on a narrow interpretation of the OCP, ignoring the wider vision, goals, and policies which the courts of British Columbia have consistently shown to be the level or the necessary level of analysis. Most public criticisms have been self-interested or unqualified in nature. Secret Cove Heights has demonstrated by way of input from relevant experts that regarding fire risk, water, environmental, and servicing, our proposal meets or exceeds the necessary technical requirements. I bring to your attention pages 36 and 37 of your agenda. This is a clear list of the policies and goals found within the Half Moon Bay OCP that Secret Cove Heights is intending to incorporate. From there, I ask you to turn to page 40 through 45 of your agenda. Here, we have demonstrated with mapping at a sufficient level of detail that the planning assumptions that underpin the Half Moon Bay OCP and which have been used to recommend abandoning our proposal are inherently flawed. On page 40, in relation to the overall land use, you will note that Stephens Way in the gray, that in 2014 when the OCP was adopted, this was swept up in the resource designation, despite having previously been designated as Rural 2 under Bylaw 310. The properties in brown on page 40, which planning have stated are better proposed for the project, are insufficient in size, farther away from fire service, without emergency egress, or undevelopable at the 2.5 acre parcel size due to cost. The community hubs, and then if you turn to page 41, the community hubs, which are shown by way of red arrows on the map, are not viable for the intended purpose under the Half Moon Bay OCP, because they are encumbered by geotechnical hazards and riparian setbacks. Furthermore, on page 42, the community at Stephens Way is shown by the yellow square. The rest of the map clearly shows that the areas closer to the hubs and around Highway 101 are more widely affected by sensitive ecosystem polygons, heavily forested parks, and additional geotechnical hazards such as slide zones. The exact details of the hub locations and why they cannot be developed densely is clearly demonstrated on page 42, 43, and 44. When considered alongside these maps, the location at Stephens Way is clearly ideal for what is being proposed. In the case of areas outside of Half Moon Bay, Your area planning commissions have all expressed support for the principles brought forward in the development of the dynamic rural zone. In the case of Roberts Creek, much of what is being proposed is already happening, albeit in contravention of existing bylaws. In West Howe Sound, the longtime chair there was clear in his statement in the February APC minutes, that by blocking local land use innovation, we are leaving our larger land base to be purchased by non-local interest to be kept as holding properties. It would be prudent to allow Secret Cove Heights, for all the reasons discussed in our memorandum, to be the test bed for this innovative concept, allowing for future analysis when the development of a regional growth strategy can be undertaken in 4 or 5 years from now. With all of the above being said, Secret Cove Heights respectfully requests that the PCDC recommend second reading to the board and that a date for public hearing be determined, which enables third reading to occur in July. This will allow Secret Cove Heights to meet any necessary conditions or to register any covenants in August while the board is on break, and return for adoption of the bylaws at the September 10 board meeting. This will permit Secret Cove Heights project, which is the primary livelihood for several local individuals and families with young children, to finally be able to get to work and enable considerable and ongoing physically distant, resilient local economic development, which our community will definitely need moving forward under the new normal of COVID-19. Thank you very much for your time and consideration to date, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that, Ms. Huska. Directors, do you have any questions on Nicole's presentation? Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm looking, much of your presentation talking about the OCP, and I'm looking at on page 11 where it says in 2014 it was swept up in the resource designation. My reading of the previous OCP, which was bylaw 325, puts these lands in the same resource category. So I don't quite understand what you mean by swept up between the former OCP and the current OCP. So if you could maybe elaborate on what that sweeping up kind of meant.
So the subdivision, as it stands up in the Stephens Way neighborhood, has had 2 phases, which has created 12 10-acre parcels. Those are all rural 2, under bylaw 310, which allows for more extensive business use of home and residential use, as opposed to the specifics of resource as they're defined in 2014 under the OCP.
Director Hiltz, was that sufficient, or did you have a follow-up?
I guess I'm still confused because I don't, sweeping up means I was kind of brought in under some kind of omnibus kind of activity, whereas to me what it looks like is that these rural resource areas from the previous OCP 325 and now to the current one was essentially to say that these lands have other values other than just for people.
I have to cut you off for 1 second, Andreas. I need you to take over chairing for me, please. I'll be right back.
All right, carry on. My apologies.
So which OCP are you speaking about?
The 325, which was the one that predated, it says in 2014, it was swept up, but it looks like even in going back to 2004, when these parcels were first subdivided, the lots 1 through 6, it was a resource designation.
Yeah, agreed. I'm sorry, I haven't read the OCP that predated 2014. I've made a Freedom of Information Act request to the CAO asking for more context because it's not readily available as far as I could find within what's on the Sunshine Coast Regional District website. That being said, the staff report states that it was when, so the land use designation as bylaw 310, which was R2, when the 2014 OCP was brought in, made it non-conforming. So it was pre-existing as residential rural residential use with multiple different business use of home uses, and then parcel size designations for use. And then the Half Moon Bay OCP in 2014 colored it gray, which was inconsistent with what was pre-existing on the property as far as land use with bylaw 310. That's what the staff report states.
Okay. Oh, right. I'm sharing. Yes. Okay. I see Director Pratt has her hand up.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ties. I think Yuli had his hand up, but my question essentially was around the same thing that Director Hiltz was saying, was regarding the what the 1990 OCP had designated that area as, because the subdivision is very clearly already pre-existing in the 2014 OCP, where it's been designated, the whole area is designated as resource. I couldn't readily find it either. So I'm hoping the planning department can provide a little additional context on the historical status of what happened previously.
Okay, to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, definitely, staff can offer some information about the land use designations in the previous OCP and the current OCP. Let me share my screen so I can show you the map. Just a second. Okay, can anybody see the map?
No, not yet.
Nope. Can you see my screen?
No.
Huh. Okay, let me try again. Hold this. Okay.
Host may have to enable you, and unfortunately,
we have IT to enable sharing because the host has disabled my sharing. So.
Yeah, and Alton is the host, and he's currently not on the call. So, unfortunately, this is might be a bit of an issue.
Can IT make an adjustment?
Unfortunately, I can't, because the actual underlying host of this meeting is the account that Tracy signed in as.
I've just been turned to a host, so now I just need to figure out on how how to do this. I will. I'm trying to figure out how to. IT, do you know how to allow Yuli to share his screen?
I believe you will find it. There should be next to the your share screen button, there should be a little arrow that brings up a menu. And you should be able to go to advanced sharing options and change the setting.
Okay. All participants can share. There we go. Okay. I have now enabled that.
Okay, let me try it. Okay. Okay, can anybody see it?
Yes, there it is.
Yeah, okay, so it's on the left side of the screen. So the map, here you can see the gray area that covers the subject lands on Stevens Way. So this is the previous OCP. So the gray area is designated as resource rural. So that was the term that was used in the previous OCP. It's called resource rural. So it's a land use designation that's focused primarily on forestry land uses. So now let me show you the current map. So this is the current map. You can see the subject land is here. And the gray area is called a resource. It's called a resource designation. So the terminology has changed a bit, but the two designations are quite similar. In the current OCP, the land use designation has been broadened to include not just forestry, but also environmental conservation and recreation and agriculture as well. So that's the maps. You can see. So this is the current one, and you can see this is the previous one.
Okay, thank you, staff. Let's go back to the participant list. There we go. Okay, Director Pratt.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so the rest of, so from bylaw 325, it appears that that subdivision below, along Stevens Way, so below Secret Cove Heights, was already pre-existing to 1990s OCP. Is that correct? Because that's
thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct.
okay. And so it was designated as resource rural on the 320 on bylaw 325. It's still essentially maintained the same designation moving forward. I find it interesting that in an area that's been designated resource, we have a large amount of residential properties, including just down, only a few hundred yards from Secret Cove Heights, the development there. There's actually a resort that's popping up with camping and a development and everything in there. So there's actually getting to be quite a bit of a dense population in essentially a resource designated area.
If I could add to that. So that's lots 1 and 2, which when you come up Stephens Way are immediately on the right. They undertook a strata development and did the 3 principal dwelling sizes and 1 auxiliary dwelling. They had the houses with the strata listed to sell and received, as far as I understand, they didn't sell. So now that's being converted to what is being called Half Moon Bay Resort. My understanding of the intention for the property, which is within their able use as per bylaw 310, is they want to put 40 RV spots at the back on the 2 lots, because that would be the maximum density that's what's permitted per the 10-acre parcels. So that's what they can do now. And what they intend to do.
To clarify on that, Nicole, that's been designated as Half Moon Bay Resort for a number of years, even previous, that predates the homes being listed to sell. It's just, it's interesting to see that the 40 RV site, I mean, this is beside the point, but I think it all speaks to how this is already becoming a hub, whether it had been intended or designated as a hub within the OCP. It's becoming its own hub already, which is part of the context I think we need to look at in relationship to the development that you represent. I'm just going to mute myself now.
Okay, do we have any staff comments on that? No. Okay, do we have any more hands up at this point in time? No. Any more comments?
Could I make one more comment? So this is the first time the 1990 OCP designations have been brought to our attention. We have requested the document in the past. I think it's it's difficult for us to make an assessment based on the 1990 OCP designation, which was obviously prioritized for primarily forestry, without all viewing the document and determining whether that 100 hectare minimum subdivision parcel size was included, because that was something that was imposed with the 2014 OCP. So if we're adding new information to the discussion, it's important that this planning department provides Secret Cove Heights with sufficient information to assess what we're looking at, because it's not been provided to us despite it being requested, and it's outstanding on a FIPA request. So.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. I think the discussion will continue when we get to the agenda item in question. And if you want to stick around, then we may ask you for comment at that time. Okay, let's move on to Annex D. Is that right? No, sorry, Annex C. The Resilient Coast Regional Plan H Community Connectedness Grant Program Proposal. Staff, would you like to make an introduction on that?
Thank you, Chair. Staff don't have much to add to the delegation's excellent presentation. As noted in the report, the direct implications for SCRD for performing in a partnership role are relatively minor. There is alignment with the strategic plan, and staff can clearly see the potential benefit of the project to the community. Thank you.
Okay, I see a hand up, Director McMahon.
Yes, good presentation, good report, great project, hardly any downsides that I could possibly see. So I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 46 of our agenda.
Okay, moved and seconded by Director Kroll. Do we have any more comments, questions? Mrs. Director McMahon, you still have your hand up. Oh, Director Pratt, go ahead.
I'd just like to say I'm glad that we're supporting it. I think it's a great, worthwhile project, and anything we can do to further build our sense of community across the coast and work together collaboratively, I am all in favor of. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Pratt. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I guess in the recommendation, it talks about representing requests from, District of Sechelt, Town of Gibsons, etc., to support the project together. I think, I don't know what that looks like. I know when the presentation was done at the District of Sechelt, we requested it referred to staff, and they come back with, how we could move something forward. So I think we just need to be clear in our communication inside of the application, what is actually required from the other governments. And we're happy to comply, but I don't know what that looks like.
Thank you. I'm hoping staff will take note. And Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I would just like to, I think staff in the delegation have done a great job to kind of do the coordinated approach. It's like make it easy for the grantor to say yes. And I think this has been a terrific example of making it easy for the grantor to say yes. So yeah, I'm totally supportive.
Okay, Director Seegers.
I just want to say thanks to SCRD staff for stepping up and indicating they'd take the lead on this. I know that there's some capacity issues at some of the other governments at this point, and they've stepped up for some of the other collaborative, programs. So thank you for taking that on. Look forward to all of the staff working together on that.
Okay, thank you. I see no more questions, no more hands up. And so I will call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations on page 46? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Annex D. Half Moon Bay Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 675.3 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 310.174. Secret Cove Heights Development. Further consideration. And I will let staff do an introduction on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report further examines the proposal from the Regional Land Use Strategic Planning and Sustainability, Climate Change, and Technical Perspectives, and indicates that the proposed development, if permitted, will lead to intensification of development in this area, which will have implications on the forest ecosystem and the SCRD's ability to manage fire protection, flooding, solid waste disposal, land use efficiency, and climate resilience. Although the proposal has the intention to generate affordable housing and economic opportunities for the community, the location is inconsistent with the overall land use principles and patterns of the OCP, and these opportunities are better suited for other locations outside of the resource designated area. An alternative development permitted under current zoning regulation for these parcels in this subject area could potentially achieve some of the goals of the proposed development. And based on this analysis, staff do not support this zoning and OCP amendment moving forward. And for the board's information, the date on the first reading on the attached bylaws should be January 23rd, 2020. And after the draft report was provided to the applicant in May, we have made a few grammatical edits to the report. So therefore, the reference to different sections of the report made by the applicant in the delegation submission may not match the final report, but the general content of the report remains the same. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. And I'm looking to directors for questions and comments. Director Lee.
Yes, I actually drove down there yesterday and was noting that there was quite a bit of development there already and more occurring. Looks a whole lot like quite a nice residential area. And as I was driving up, I was thinking about the proposed uses of it and the fact that a lot of the proposed uses would not be considered acceptable in a high density area, such as raising animals for your personal use and having storefronts. My take is it looked to me like it was about the right area for this kind of thing to occur. I couldn't see elsewhere in fact in Pender Harbor or in Half Moon Bay where the community would be so welcoming for this type of activity as they are in this development area. So I just thought I'd make those comments. It was an interesting eye-opener to drive up there. Also, I was very impressed by the road. Nice paved road. And it's looks like it's not going to be a heavy traffic area because of the spaced out properties. So those are my thoughts on this.
Thank you. We'll go to Director McMahon, please.
I have been pretty consistent at the board in voting against development that is essentially sprawling outside of the areas that we have designated for growth. We have a big challenge here on the coast in trying to deliver services in a geographically dispersed, car-dependent community. And especially as chair of the Transportation Committee, I have a hard time supporting something that creates yet more 100% car-dependent development. So I have a hard time with this. I also have a hard time, we have policies and plans, and it seems like every time somebody comes up with another idea, we make an exception. But, you know, if you're going to have a plan, you have to follow the plan, or you have to change the plan, one or the other. But we're living with a lot of decisions that were made about development in areas where I think they shouldn't have allowed development, and we are now living with the consequences. So I have to be against this. Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to Director Lee.
I didn't put my hand down. I was too slow.
Oh, okay.
I
Director
would like to
Pratt.
say now that I got the stage that I believe that the development that's proposing will actually reduce the dependence on cars. People will not be commuting, they'll be working from home, which is a noble goal in my mind.
Okay, moving on to Director Pratt. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ties. I see the great validity in this project. Where I'm torn is the recommendations from staff and the recommendations from the APC. So to me, there's a couple of different pieces here. We have the dynamic rural zone, which everyone in some way or form does support and wants to see more investigation and more of a more exploration on that as we look at future land use planning for the whole Sunshine Coast and as part of our regional growth strategy. But to talk specifically about this parcel, I see it and having some of the context of what the OCP looked like in 1990 when there was already a significant subdivision already in place there in already a designated resource area is, you know, it's interesting to have that context now too, because that's one of the things that that I've been struggling with is why was there already a subdivision there? The sprawl has, or that road, Stevens Way, has been there for as long as I've lived here, into my memory. I'm not sure exactly when it was paved up there. It's been interesting to watch the development that has occurred along that area, and to see the community hub that is occurring. There's you know, the services, to speak to what Director McMahon said about the transportation, anyone who lives north of Red Roofs Road or north of Half Moon Bay proper, we tend to not have transportation already as it is. I'm just north of this development in Secret Cove, and we, for maybe 2 months of the year, we have the additional bus service up here on a reduced level in the Secret Cove area. So it's, you know, as we look moving forward, I mean, of course, it's part of the long-term plan for that bus service along the highway, but we're not there yet, and we won't be there yet for a while. And if that were the case, then we'd be keeping all transportation, or pardon me, all development south of Half Moon Bay as a whole. If that were one of the factors we were looking at to keep the community hubs around the municipal centers and densify there. I think the proposal still leaves it in a very rural fashion. I think it recognizes what's already happening in the coast and what what we'd like to see more of on the coast. I'm still not 100% which way I want to go on this, and which is probably why I'm weaving through recommendations. However, I think, especially as we're going through a crisis across the world, across the coast with this pandemic that we've seen, we need to find a way for each one of our communities to be more resilient, to be more self-sufficient in its own way, and to find a new way of doing things. And if you can work from home and have your garden and have smaller employees or smaller business with just a couple of employees at your home, you know, maybe this is how we need to look at doing something different. And this was not an option, or this wasn't something that was being looked at when we were redoing the OCP in 2013, 2014. So this is an idea that's come up since. I hear the concerns with it being so close to the community forest area and the privately managed forest area. The water systems there would be all on well. There is a concern about arsenic within those wells, as is everything above the applicant is certainly aware of all these issues. So, like I said, I'm still a bit on the fence, but I'm still leaning towards more of pushing it through, going through to second reading and having the public hearing on it before a final decision is made. I think we're in a completely different time and place globally than what we were when the OCP was made. And I think we need to look forward to how we can be, we just talked about the resilient coast and building community, and this is one way of maybe looking at that a little bit differently.
Thank you, Director Pratt. I see Director Toth, or Chair Toth, is back. I will hand over the chairing duties, but before I do, I just want to just throw in my my comments, and one is that it often helps to look in the past to see where things are coming from and where it all started. But as Director Pratt said, the OCP was completed in 2014, and a lot has changed since then, and I think there's a lot of the new dynamics at play. And I think the best way to get a sense of the community and the here and now and how this application may pan out is through a public hearing. And so I'm leaning towards moving it forward to the public hearing. But I will now hand over the chairing duties to Director Toth, and I see I've created a whole lot of comments here.
Thank you, Director Ties. Vice Chair Director Ties. Thank you for taking over while I had to step away. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Vice Chair, for stepping in there. Great job. Yeah, the style of development that happened, I went back to lots 1 and 6 were in 2004. It was before 2004. It was one large chunk, right? Then 2004, lots 1 to 6, closer to the road. Next 6, 2008, lots 7 to 12, leaving the remainder. So if I was to look at this in reverse order, I would say the most dense places should have been in lots 1 and 6. So what we've got is the most density, the furthest away. So in my job, in order to support a sustainable infrastructure for the Sunshine Coast Regional District, it doesn't match with that financial sustainability. And I see it in Area A. I am dealing with people on Gambier Island who have bought into a subdivision there, and they are really struggling to have services, whether that's road maintenance, water, fire protection, emergency services, garbage removal. It's very difficult. And there are other areas of area aside from the islands which development has happened. And so looking forward, I don't see this as being sustainable. It is true that we need solutions of affordable housing and options and diverse housing, but I see this as something for the future. This is not the right time for this. This is an area which is the resource rural from the previous OCP and the current OCP is to have less people. That's the general aspect of it, is to have less people in this area. Put the people, confine people. And so this goes in opposite direction. You put the most people the furthest away from the road. And I do note that in the comments from the neighbors, the one neighbor finds 10 acres too large to manage. Well, I am on 3 acres and I can just barely manage 3 acres myself. I wouldn't what people expect to do with 10 acres when they buy it in this area, like, I don't know. So I really can't support putting this infrastructure the furthest away. And when you look at it on a map, it's this little cluster sitting out 5 kilometers up a road or 3 kilometers up a road into the hinterland. And I think there's a lot better places that we can try to encourage the growth. So I really can't support this.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Oh, Director Hiltz pretty much covered off most of what I had to say. You can zone properties any way you want, but you can't necessarily, well, you can't dictate what people will really do on their property. In my area, I have a lot of rural properties that are zoned for a second dwelling. And, you know, by policy, we hope that more people would put in second dwellings because we've got existing infrastructure and we need affordable housing, but they're not doing that. 90% of the properties do not have that second dwelling. So you can make zoning decisions, but if people don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And I'm not sure that there will be the demand for that sort of rural dynamic activity in such a remote area. At any rate, I'm going to make a motion. I am going to move staff's recommendations on page 51 of the agenda.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Director Hiltz seconding. Director Lee, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, I kind of thought that's what we were doing, but I would like to speak against the motion, actually. Things are moving very fast in the last couple of years. It's getting extremely tough to survive. It's getting extremely tough to survive here on the coast. This is a way to help people survive. And we appear to be going to turn it down, and I'm very upset about it. I've been here since nothing was here, and I've watched the place grow. And it's getting too cityfied for me, to be quite frank about it. And here we are going to tell people what to do with their property. I think the people that live there need to tell us what they'd like to do with their property. And I believe the best way of doing that is to let it go to a public hearing and let everybody be heard, not for us to shut off the debate because we don't like it. So that's my thoughts on this.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Director Paul, I'm afraid I'm going to put you on the spot. On page 121 was a letter from the Sechelt Nation to the Secret Cove Heights development. I'm not sure if you've reviewed this, but I'd sure like to hear what the nation's perspective of this type of development. If that's within protocol here, I'm not sure. I'll let you decide.
Unfortunately, I never had time to do the review of the letter, and I will refer this back. This is my first time sitting through a planning, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to sit here and take in the conversation on this. It's been probably a decade or more since I've had the opportunity, and things have changed quite dramatically from the way it has. We have done the business of the board. I will reserve comment at this particular point in time to get back to my team and find the letter and have a conversation with them.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody? Oh, Director Pratt.
Thanks. I think for me, I'm going to speak against the motion, and I would prefer to see this move forward to a second reading and a public hearing. I think we there's a lot that I think needs to be heard from in terms of community. I take great respect in what I've heard from my APC. I take great respect in what I've heard from staff and what I've heard from the proponent and the owners of this property. And I think it does bear going to a second reading and public hearing to hear from the community as a whole. We're in a very different time and place, and I'd like to hear from a broader spectrum of the community and their vision going forward.
Okay. No more hands up. So I guess I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated. Anybody else like to make another motion? Director Hiltz?
Just like to record the vote, please, for myself.
Okay. Director McMahon, would you like that recorded as well? Okay. All right. Yeah. Is there anybody that would like to make an alternative motion? Director Pratt?
I guess the alternative motion would be that I don't know if it's captured, if that other option is captured within the report. The options, just hang on 1 second. One moment, please.
Page 60, top of page 160. Or
160?
60.
60, thank you. Thank you, Director McMahon. Okay, so we have
sorry, bottom 59.
Bottom of what, page 59, and then go, okay, so what I would like to recommend is that the board goes to, that the board holds second reading of the proposed bylaw, and I would suggest that well, we have alternative 1 and alternative 2 to either consider proposal. I'm going to look to staff onto how to best proceed here, because I mean, we do have alternative 1 and alternative 2 that are on page 59 and page 60. But I'm just wondering if we require amendment to these at this time. I don't see the need at this time. I would just say, so I don't know if alternative 2 is necessary. So I would look to staff for that.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. If the committee is supportive of the bylaws as presented, noting that a date correction needs to be made, as the senior planner mentioned, then the motion can simply say that the bylaws and the recording secretary would name them in the motion, be given second reading, and that a public hearing be scheduled. And prior to the second reading, staff would work with directors and with the applicant to confirm a date for that public hearing, subject to everyone's availability. Thank you.
So
thank you, Mr. Hall.
I'd like to move that.
Yeah, I think that's what I'd heard you say, Director Pratt. Yeah. Seconded, Director Lee. Okay. Anybody wanting to speak to that? Director Pratt.
I would just like to recognize the amount of time and effort our staff has put into working with the applicant on this project the whole way through. I recognize it's been a very long process through multiple planners. So between the applicant, the applicant's, I'm going to say tenacity in staying with this project, because I know it's very, very long through some changes in planning staff. Thank you Gibson's and Seashelt. And our planning team has been very diligent in working with the applicant. And I wanted to recognize our staff with that. So thank you so much for that.
All right, Director Lee.
Yes, I'd like to recognize the staff, even though I'm going against their recommendation. I know they're doing exactly what all the rules and the regulations say and what they feel is right. And we're kind of changing course here a little bit on them. And I sure do appreciate all the work they've done. And I appreciate their patience with us, most of all. That's really appreciated. So thank you.
It's okay for us to disagree with staff from time to time. I mean, if we were only ever going to agree with their recommendations, there's really no point in us being here at all, is there? Last comments, anybody? Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. Just if we could have the motion read out, please. The motion that's been moved and seconded, if we could just read that.
Sure. Not sure who our recording secretary is today.
Thank you, Chair. I have that the report be received and that Half Moon Bay Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 675.3 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 310174 be forwarded to the board for second reading and that a public hearing be scheduled.
All right. Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Directors Hiltz and McMahon, would you like those recorded? Yes, from both of them. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to staff. Thank you to Ms. Huska for being here today. And we're gonna move on. Okay. Annex E, pages 124 to 127. Updated target volume Church Road Wellfield project. GM Rosenboom.
Good morning, everybody. This report is to provide an update on the Church Road Well project, and in particular, an update on the volume we're potentially can get out of the well field and some regulatory implications associated with that increased target volume. You know, the Church Road well field is going to develop in the close proximity of the current Brentham's well, and on the other side of the Soames Creek, there is another well, Soames well, that's currently providing water to the Soames neighborhood. Both wells are drawing water from the same aquifer, and so they're always should be considered as one big diversion from that aquifer. So from that perspective, we always looked at any impacts to the Soames diversion and considered it as one big diversion in terms of impacts. The Soames well is currently only drawing 1.1 liters a second while it was developed and tested and constructed to produce 16.7 liters a second. So as part of the initial assessment the last several years, we identified that there might be potential to increase our diversion from that well without further impacting the environment or the creek flows or any other people in the neighborhood, because the well was already designed for that volume. We now also confirmed that the existing infrastructure between the two systems, between the Grantham system and the Soames system, is sufficient to move that water over, and almost no additional infrastructure costs would need to be made to connect the two systems permanently. What it would do, it would require us to submit a notification to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategies, the Environmental Assessment Office, and that's a requirement under the Environmental Assessment Act. Such a notification is not does not trigger us to actually get an environmental assessment certificate. Just requires us to notify them, and it would allow the ministry or the environmental assessment of 60 days to get back to us with any further questions they might have. So this, the recommendations in the report speaks about sending a letter to the Minister Heyman to ask for an expedited review of our notifications once submitted, as well as for a budget increase for our contractor to ensure that we have all the information required to submit our notification to the Environmental Assessment Office. Thank you, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Director Seegers.
Thank you. It's always good news when we get more money or more water at minimal cost. That's great. I'm going to move the recommendations as presented.
Okay. Seconded by multiple people. This is voting all, of course. Director Pratt, would you like to speak?
Well, I was going to move the recommendations and just comment on what great news this was. So thank you, Director Seegers, for taking my thunder.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a question of staff, and if I may, it's the right now. I assume that SOMS has a threshold of a diversion rate. So is that the maximum diversion rate that we're you're proposing to go to, and is there a benefit? What's the benefit to seeing it as all as one big diversion versus, like, would it be two separate water licenses before? And because it all goes into one water pipe at the end, that's kind of, I'm just trying to figure out the pieces, and there seems to be a benefit to this, more water, but there's also a licensing benefit somewhere in this.
Thank you for the question. So what is required is, we currently have the rights to divert at 1.1 under the Water Sustainability Act to divert at 1.1 because that's our historic use. We would need to apply for an additional license to make it to the 60.7. That additional license can be made in the upcoming weeks, and because all the assessments are already done, and the ministry confirmed that they will review it as one, even though there might be a slight delay in the permitting of to use the SOMS well, that would not have an impact on any of the construction works because those are on the Churchwood well field. So it would only mean that we would not be able to go to the max capacity until we receive that application, maybe in a year from now.
All right. Director McMahon.
I'm just going to point out that it's not voting all because longstanding Town of Gibsons and SIGD are disenfranchised on water.
Thank you for that correction. Totally reading the wrong spot on my agenda. It's A, B, D, E, F, and District of Sechelt. All right. Any other comments? All those in favor? Great. It's 11 o'clock. Do we want to take a 5-minute break? Okay. We will be back in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are now moving on to Annex F, page 128 in our package. Development variance permit application, DVP 00042, 2484 Milliner Road. Would somebody like to speak to this? Mr. Patey.
Thank you, Chair. This development variance permit, DVP 42 for 2484 Milliner Road, was received. The request is to reduce the natural boundary setback to a water course from 15 meters to 11.4 meters to permit the construction of a new single-family dwelling, and reduce the natural boundary setback to a water course from 15 meters to 5.3 meters, and reduce the lot line setback from 5 meters to 0 meters to permit a previously constructed non-conforming auxiliary building. If you look at the site plan, that's the building in the southernmost portion of the lot, and that is a greenhouse. And there are pictures of that greenhouse in the report. The property is only permitted to have one dwelling due to the lot area. If the variance is issued, the applicant will be required to decommission the existing building such that it becomes primarily an auxiliary dwelling with no overnight accommodation permitted in that building. Joe Smith Creek runs along the western portion of the lot and within DPA number 2A for Creek River Corridor and DPA number 4 for Stream Riparian Assessment Area. We have received a development permit application, which is DP 121. It's been received and processed and is ready for issuance, subject to the issuance of this DVP. The proposed new single-family dwelling is located as far away from the SPIA, that's the Streamside Protection and Enhancement Area, as possible, and is consistent with policies in the DPA number 4 for riparian areas. MOTI has issued an encroachment permit for the greenhouse to allow it to encroach 0.9 meters into the road right-of-way, and a setback relief permit to allow for the applicant to reduce the front lot line setback from the 4.5 meters to 0 meters. We haven't received any comments from neighbors as a result of the notification. Roberts Creek APC recommended approval, and planning staff support the issuance of the development variance permit, DVP 42.
Great. Thank you for that. So just to catch something you'd said in there, they plan on decommissioning the existing dwelling into an auxiliary dwelling with no allowance for overnight stay. Is that what I heard you say?
Thank you. I'll clarify. Into an auxiliary building. Essentially, it's an accessory building, and it will have to be decommissioned. And what that means is removing wiring for the stove, typically removing counters and cabinets and sleeping facilities, and such that it becomes just an accessory building or auxiliary building as we define it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from directors? Director Hiltz.
Thanks. I did have a question about the qualified person, the ROAR report, and it was completed in 2015. So I previously asked staff about the best before date on these reports in light of the drainage issues that we've had in Roberts Creek. So how valid does an opinion stay valid for in terms of what's happening there? That was November 2015, which is like 4.5 years ago. And if you may, my second question is about the permanence of the greenhouse structure. I note in the Roberts Creek APC comments that they're wondering about that greenhouse. Is that a forever fixture, or does that setback only carry on while that structure is there? So two questions.
Thank you for the great questions, Chair. The first question, the RAR assessment, the one that we have on file, accurately follows the methodology required by the province for RAR assessments, and the proposed works are consistent to this day, given that the SPIA in that report is identified at 10 meters. So the new construction is proposed completely outside of that SPIA area, and that we confirm through the province that riparian areas assessments have a shelf life essentially of 5 years. This report was issued November 19th, 2015. So they have until that time this year to complete on the works proposed within that RAR assessment. So 5-year lifespan to answer that question. The second one, the permanence of the greenhouse, we thought about that as well. There's a significant amount of concrete that went into the construction of this greenhouse. In order to, they could remove the greenhouse, but it would be significant works within that SPIA. And at this point, it's since the yard has somewhat naturalized in and around the greenhouse, it's, staff made a comment in the report that it may cause further impacts to the SPIA. If the greenhouse, with respect to permanence, if it was to be removed, then they no longer would be afforded that the setback variance proposed in this application. Any future construction would have to meet the setback requirements of the zone and then on this lot.
Okay, I think that answers the question. That the setback variance is tied to the structure, not to the forever title of the land. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. And while I do question the permanence of the decommissioning process, nowadays you can get yourself a plug-in. Was it induction stove, and it's easy enough to move beds back in. That sounds like an optimal way for an Airbnb, but I do see that there was an assessment done and that 10 meters was recommended as a setback. So I have no further objections with this application and would like to move it. Move the recommendations as on page 128.
All right, seconded by Director McMahon. This is rural planning, so it is rural directors only. Any last minute comments, questions? All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Moving on to Annex G, page 162, DVP application 60, 3385 Spruce Road. Staff.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant in this variance request is requesting to increase the maximum height of an auxiliary dwelling from 4.5 meters to 5.1 meters, so 0.6 meter variance, to permit conversion of an existing carport structure to an auxiliary dwelling unit. Section 503 of the zoning bylaw states that the maximum height of a building which is separate from the principal residence and which contains an auxiliary dwelling unit shall not exceed 4.5 meters. This height limitation for auxiliary dwelling units, in conjunction with the size limitation of 55 square meters maximum floor area, are intended to distinguish the auxiliary dwelling as subordinate to the principal dwelling. The rationale for this variance request is to avoid having to demolish the existing carport structure and to make use of the existing materials, including the large beams, metal roof, gutters, and downspouts. Proposed development is in keeping the general form and character of the residential development in the surrounding neighborhood. Roberts Creek APC met on May 19th and recommended the variance is acceptable if neighbors don't have concerns. No comments have been received from notified neighbors, and planning staff support the issuance of this variance, subject to condition listed in the recommendation.
Great. Thank you very much. Anytime we can save structures and materials from going to our landfill, I'm all over that. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd be happy to move those recommendations on page 162 as provided.
All right, seconded by Director McMahon. Any final comments, questions? No. All those in favor? Rural directors. Thank you very much. That's carried. Moving on to Annex H. Page 172, DVP application 61 for 1952 Ocean Beach Esplanade. I understand the applicant wanted to also speak for 2 minutes, and I see he's just joined us there. So thank you, staff, for getting him connected. We'll turn it over to staff first, I think.
Thank you, Chair. The variance request in this case is to reduce the front lot line setback from 5 meters to 0 meters to permit an addition and alteration to an existing single-family dwelling and construction of a new engineered retaining wall system. A DVP application was issued by the board on January 24th, 2018. However, the applicant did not substantially commence the proposed construction within 2 years and that permit lapsed on January 24th, 2020. There's currently one single-family dwelling on the subject lot. It was built in 1952. The existing single-family dwelling is located on the forward portion of the subject lot. Despite the large parcel area, there's no other safe buildable areas due to the identified geotechnical hazards. In conjunction with this DVP, a development permit has been submitted and processed. It's DP 37 for DPA 1B coastal slopes and is ready for issuance, subject to issuance of this DVP. Required as part of the DP, a safe harmless covenant has been registered on title. The covenant also contains a special clause detailing the requirements and maintenance for the non-disturbance area, as specified by the retained geotechnical engineer in their report. There's a board policy 136410-8 for geohazard acceptability in development specifies that restoration and small additions includes repair of a damaged structure or rebuilding of a structure within its existing location and spatial limits. Small additions include rebuilding of a structure within its existing foundation, and attached expansion to an existing building and detached additional dwelling with a gross floor area not exceeding 25% of the existing building or 60 square meters. The proposed addition in this case does not exceed 25% of the existing building GFA, and the construction of the engineered lock block retaining wall for increased protective measures meets SCRD standards outlined in the policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Our late item is a photograph of this particular site. Do we have any questions for staff or questions for Mr. Bone, who has joined us? Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm supportive of the applicant's request, and thank you, applicant, for holding up the slope behind your house. That's appreciated. I understand that not everyone is taking those steps to stabilize the slope. It's kind of a curiosity question. On page 173 in the outline of the lot, there's that kind of the bay window on the lot there. And I was just wondering if you have any historical context of how that little bump out happened. Either staff or the applicant.
Mr. Patey, do you have any insight in that?
Thank you, Chair. I don't, actually. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bone, do you have any insight in that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, you mean the bump in the land behind there? Or the
down on Ocean Beach Esplanade, where it juts out a little bit.
The property boundary.
Well, yeah, I guess when my dad bought the property in 1952, or his grandfather did, because he was overseas, I just picked a point-to-point view. So the kind of bump out behind me in the land there was just a natural occurring thing. The property to the east of me, I guess that let loose a million years ago. That's why there's at low tide, there's a big bump out there. But yeah, that's been, although it kind of looks kind of menacing, but it's been that way for about 40 years behind the cabin. And that's why we've got a good geotech in and designed a system that'll help keep us safe.
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. If the director's asking about the portion of the parcel that projects onto Ocean Beach Esplanade, I believe that's because there are a number of properties where a portion of the road right-of-way has been closed to either facilitate construction or legalize an existing dwelling. And as noted, I believe in the report, the right-of-way is extremely wide, and so it's just kind of a historical anomaly for the way that the parcels are laid out. And if we were to look at parcel outlines for some other parcels along the Esplanade, we'd see similar shapes like that along the front property line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I misunderstood the question. So basically, my dad bought the property in 52, built the cabin in 65. In 2009, I inquired about rebuilding the cabin, discovered the property line, although 70 feet was from the road, actually ran through the kitchen. I guess the area was surveyed from a desk in Victoria in 1907. So in 2014, I applied to Modi to buy a small piece of road allowance, 95 square meters, to make the place conforming. That took 3 years. I think there's still about a dozen places down there that the road allowance kind of runs through the structure. So I understand they changed the OCP to make it a little easier for other owners to do the same sort of thing. So like I said, there's still 70 feet from, you know, my place to the road. And it's also elevated, which the picture doesn't really show, by about 30 feet. So there'll be no changes to the general public nor my neighbors.
Great. Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Like the Rob's Kitchen bump out. Ocean Beach Esplanade is one giant variance, and everybody wrestles with these things. This is a perfectly straightforward application. I'm happy to support it. I'm happy to move staff's recommendation on page 172.
Okay, that's been seconded. Mr. Patey's very patiently trying to get my attention here. So, Mr. Patey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of notes that I seem to have missed in my speaking notes today. MOTI has issued a setback relief permit for the applicant to reduce the front line setback. The Elphinstone ACP Advisory Planning Commission recommended the DVP be issued. We did receive a letter in support of this variance, and planning staff are supportive of issuance of this DVP. When we looked at the amount of land between the edge of pavement and the front lot line, and it's approximately 15 meters. So there's a significant amount of area for future road expansion should MOTI propose to expand the road.
Mr. Patey, how wide is that road allowance?
That's a good question. Thank you. From memory, it's only about 6 meters wide at most, but that's going from memory. I'd have to go back to the map and measure it again, but it's a fairly narrow road. I don't think it would meet the 2-lane. Typically, a lane standard is about 3.25 to 3.4 meters for a single lane. So somewhere around 7 meters would satisfy 2 travel lanes. And this road doesn't meet that.
Sorry, my question was how wide is the allowance that's there? Like the actual, do we know?
We don't. We'd have to do a measurement, but it's significant. It's from that 15 meters to the edge of pavement and then the opposite direction towards the beach, towards the high water mark.
It's our future highway someday. Director Pratt.
Thank you. I'm very happy to support this. I've been to I'm very familiar with Ocean Beach Esplanade, and I've been speaking with the applicant as well, just through this process, and yeah, it's as Director McMahon said, the whole thing is an anomaly. it's a variant. Ocean Beach Esplanade is its own variance, so it's yeah. I think this is just it just has to be done in this area.
For sure. Okay, Director Hiltz.
Yeah, the final call. I just wanted to thank the applicant for going through the process and trying to tidy up these historical loose ends that are still there. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us today. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Rural directors. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thanks very much. If anybody knows any rentals, I got to be out of my rental by August 1st. So I was I didn't realize my previous DVP lapsed. So I kind of got out of there quickly. But yeah, thanks for your time and have a great day, guys. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Director Pratt.
One thing that Director McMahon had brought up with me privately that wasn't reflected in the motion was moving this to board this afternoon.
Right, because of the timeliness of...
Because of the timeliness for the applicant. So I would like to make a second motion that this be moved to board this afternoon, please.
All right, and Director McMahon seconding. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex I, MOTI request for concurrence and statutory right-of-way for erosion protection works at Dakota Bridge, Port Mellon Highway. Who would like to speak to this?
I will, Chair. Thank you. So the province has contacted SCRD regarding planned work on and around the bridge over McNair Creek on Port Mellon Highway. The province is requesting a letter of non-objection to proceed with the work this summer and an access right-of-way for future maintenance. Concurrence on a dike maintenance agreement is also required. The project will benefit coast businesses and all highway users, and the requested agreements and access have a negligible impact on SCRD. So staff recommend granting the requested permissions and concurrence and are prepared to support project communications to our contacts in the hillside area. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from directors? Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations as presented.
Okay, seconder? Seconded. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. It's this is a rare opportunity. Modi comes and says, we're going to fix the problem for you. We're going to pay for it. How do we make this work? I go, okay, I love it. So my question is about the downstream effects, right? Engineers are going to say, no problem. This is going to fix it. SCRD interest is more downstream, and I'm particularly interested in the Dakota Creek Forest Service Road, which SCRD has maintenance responsibilities. And so my question for staff is, how did we end up looking after a road traffic bridge? And if is it an asset in SCRD asset management and replacement and all the other stuff that goes along with the assets? And the final piece is, how significant is the lower Dakota Creek Bridge with respect to the hillside operations? So sorry, three questions. How do we get into it? What's the liability in terms of assets and the necessity for it for the hillside operations?
All right, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Staff will do their best to answer that. So there is a Forest Service road, the McNair Forest Service Road, that runs below Port Mellon Highway and is an access route in to several properties in the Hillside Industrial Park. And it has two sort of exits from Port Mellon Highway, and because it's a loop, it also crosses over the creek. And so, similar to the use agreement that we have for the Dakota Forest Service Road that goes up to Dakota Ridge Winter Recreation Area, we hold a use agreement for a portion of that Forest Service Road that includes this bridge. And we have held that agreement, staff believes, since the time that Hillside Industrial Park was subdivided. And the bridge itself is owned by the province, and SCRD shares maintenance responsibility, and we do annual maintenance on the bridge. And in terms of how important it is for Hillside, as I noted, the FSR is the access for a number of industrial properties, and the bridge does serve to link the two accesses to the highway and to other industrial properties in the area. And staff haven't canvassed the industrial tenants within the Hillside Park on exactly how essential the bridge is, but by virtue of it being a link, it certainly provides an additional access. It disperses traffic, and it probably shortens the route between some of the properties. Thank you.
All right.
May I follow up?
Sure.
If the FSR bridge got washed out, who would be responsible for paying for the replacement?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, Director. So, sorry. Staff haven't had an opportunity to investigate fully how responsibility would flow from, let's say, an act of God scenario. But in past conversations with the province about responsibility for major repairs to the bridge, the province has indicated that they seek a partnership approach and are prepared to collaborate. So staff would be looking to work with the province if there was a scenario where the bridge needed some work. It is a very, very heavy duty bridge. I believe it's rated for about 150 tons. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on something that Director Hiltz said. That Modi is somewhat notorious for doing improvements of this sort that do not meet their own standards for hydrological best practices, with the result that you have downstream problems. And I don't know if there's any way that we can be assured that the proposed works meet their own standards, because I do somewhere, I can't find it right now, I have a copy of their stormwater management guidelines, which they have since taken down off their website. And it's really important that stormwater be handled well. We're having, as we all know, big problems with washouts, stormwater, and it's getting more severe, and it rains a lot near Rainy River. Funny thing.
Thank you for that. I don't know if staff have any insight to share on that in terms of Modi standards or ensuring that they actually build to the standards that they dictate they do.
Thank you, Chair. Staff would note that we have been, as part of the contact from the province, we are aware that professional engineers and qualified environmental professionals are involved with the property. And as I'm sure directors know, if there are changes to creeks that are observed by people who know those creeks the best, the regional district is often on the notification list, or sometimes even the first to be contacted. And so should we become aware of a situation, we do have a number of project contacts we can refer issues to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? We do have some recommendations here, and this is voting all. So the Town of Gibsons and the District of Sechelt and SIGD get to participate in this one. Would somebody like to move recommendations? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex J, Henderson Beach license renewal, Parks Planning Coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just let me, just lost my notes here, but I'll go with it like this. So Henderson, this is a beach access point. This is a license, a foreshore license agreement, and this report seeks to give a little bit of background on it for renewal. The foreshore license is located in the western section of Roberts Creek at the end of Beach Avenue, where it intersects with Henderson Road. It's 0.09 hectares in size, which is about a quarter of an acre. And the purpose of it is for to have recreational usage of the area. The SCR, the license is with the province, and the SCRD has held the license since 1977, I believe, which makes it one of the longer ones that I've seen in renewing and having renewed these. So the purpose of the license, as I said before, is to kind of reserve the area for recreational purposes, walking, swimming, boating. In the past, there was some industrial activity in the area. I think contractors were barging houses into that beach, which is probably why the license was applied for by the SCRD to begin with. And at the beginning, the two were allowed together, the recreation and the industrial activity. And then the industrial activity component was taken out, kind of reflecting the rural recreational nature of that area. Above the foreshore license is a Modi right-of-way, which the SCRD has a maintenance agreement on. So there's a little beach access there that comes off the road. And that area in there, interestingly enough, is the site of a community knotweed removal project, not involving herbicides. So that's been going on for the last 5 years there. So beaches are very important to people on the Sunshine Coast and to Roberts Creek in particular. It's mentioned several times in the OCP. And so we would recommend, staff recommend renewing this license for a period of 10 years. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Adams. I'm happy to move the recommendations, but the one thing that has been brought to my attention recently is the parking issue around that location, especially during COVID times when people were still interested in going to the beach, but all the provincial parks were closed, and there were up to 20 cars parked along Henderson there and in that area just to get to that beach. So just something to be aware of. I don't know if staff has any comments as to what could be done about this, but yeah, otherwise I'm happy to move the recommendations.
All right, and I see a seconder for those. Mr. Adams, did you want to discuss that? Has there been past problems with parking through that area? Is there any contemplation to maybe someday look at, looks like a fairly wide road allowance actually on Henderson, so I wonder if there is any opportunity to someday expand parking for that beach access?
I can make a comment on that. Thank you for the question, Chair. So I think that there was some planning in the past, and that the knotweed issue kind of came in, and so you can't really do any development in that area until that knotweed's gone. That's kind of a Modi standard. So I think once the knotweed's removed, we could look at opportunities for to shore up some of the issues there.
Okay, thank you very much. Community parks, rural directors, all those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex K, page 203, Dakota Ridge Volunteer Insurance and Letter of Recognition Request. Back to you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide some context and a request for different insurance for the volunteers on Dakota Ridge, as well as request a letter of recognition from the Board of Directors to acknowledge the services that the volunteers provide. So as background, Dakota Ridge is a winter recreation area that offers cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and sledding during the winter months on the Sunshine Coast. The area and facility is operated by the SCRD in partnership with the province through a Section 57 recreation area agreement and with the local community through volunteerism. In order to offer and maintain opportunities for safe and healthy outdoor winter activities, staff work closely with community volunteers at Dakota Ridge. There are 3 types of volunteers on Dakota Ridge, roughly. Trail hosts who act as ambassadors on the weekends, groomers who use the various machines to help maintain the trails, mostly on weekends, and thirdly, those who participate in various projects, one-off work projects through the year on the Hill. This report concerns the former 2, the trail hosts and the groomers, who usually number about 35. They're the core volunteer group up there. And they contribute a combined 1,800 hours, almost 1,800 hours of volunteer time to the facility annually between December and March. So that's a sizable commitment. Those volunteers receive training and orientation annually from staff as part of the volunteer program, which has its own manuals and procedures. A recent review of insurance between the SCRD and the Municipal Insurance Agency of British Columbia, who are our service providers there, revealed an opportunity to provide better coverage for liability insurance for the volunteers through the associate membership insurance program. So just as an aside, usually volunteers, when they're under the direct control of staff, are covered by the SCRD's liability insurance. In that case, staff would often be on site, such as during those work parties. However, staff are not on site during the weekends at Dakota Ridge, and therefore the associate member insurance program better aligns with the non-supervised volunteer trail host and groomer program. This insurance provides, the associate member insurance provides the same coverage as our general liability. There's one small difference. The payout limit is $5 million on the associate member. Ours is $40 million. This is the same insurance approach. So this associate member insurance is the same insurance approach recently approved by the board for the Half Moon Bay Citizens Association at Homesite Creek. Staff recommend providing this insurance to the volunteers at a cost. The cost is $250 annually, and that can be covered out of the Dakota Ridge operating budget, as outlined in option 1. And finally, staff recommend that a letter be sent on behalf of the board to all of the volunteers over the past 2 seasons, recognizing and appreciating the work they put in towards providing healthy winter recreation opportunities to residents and visitors of the Sunshine Coast. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's amazing the amount of work that the volunteers in our community are able to accomplish, whether it's trail building and maintenance, or Dakota Ridge, or marine search and rescue, our fire departments. Anything we can do to support them is great. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for making that suggestion. And I will happily move those recommendations. It's well worth the $250.
All right, I see multiple seconders. Director McMahon, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, just briefly. In our budget process, what seems like a million years ago, pre-COVID, we had some extra HR time set aside for volunteer management, I believe it was. I was just wondering where that stands and whether this is the sort of program that person was intended to assist with.
That's a great question, perhaps for our CAO if he were here. Oh, Mr. Hall, can you speak to that?
Seeing as the CAO had to step away for a moment, I will say that the corporate approach to supporting our volunteers is on the work plan, and I know our senior manager of HR is looking forward to getting that project started in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Totally supportive. Great project. Thank you, staff. I am constantly amazed by what MIA has to offer us, and I'm interested. Is it MIA who initiated the review, or is it SCRD who initiated the review? If anyone knows that details, because anytime I hear anything about MIA, it's always good. I just never hear anything bad about MIA.
Mr. Adams.
Yeah, so that was part of a staff review that was in alignment with the Homesite Creek volunteerism as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Director Hiltz, happy to provide you a couple of examples where MIA is not necessarily good news, but we can do that offline. This is, Director Seegers knows what I'm talking about. This is voting all because it's Dakota Ridge, and seeing no more hands, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex. I will ask, because I had to step away, did you guys receive the APC minutes already? No? Okay. Motion to receive Annex L, M, and N, the APC minutes. Moved? Seconded? All those in favor? Great. Okay. Is there any business arising or anything anybody wants to flag from any of those 3 items? Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm going to the area A APC. There was something that was in the comments about on page 221, the comments about the Cove restaurant. It sounds like maybe Director Lee knows about what this food sales in the Cove restaurant. There's some relationship there that maybe you could just kind of put some details around.
You're looking at page 210?
I got 211.
11, 10 and 11.
211. I heard 221 the first time, so I was.
Oh, sorry. It's the two and 11s after that. 211.
Okay.
And
Director Lee, do you know what he's talking about? Let's start with that. Director Hiltz.
Director Lee is muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, I messed up my Zoom here, so I'm trying to figure out how to get it back. What was the question again?
The question is on page 221 with regards to the Earls Cove redevelopment from BC Ferries and the piece about the Cove restaurant ceases business and food sales. And it also tied with where Tom Sylvie recused himself as apparently a conflict. So I was just wondering a little bit of details about that relationship.
Yes, Tom and his wife manages the Cove restaurant, so he recused himself from the discussion on that. And the concern from the APC on the Cove restaurant is they're just wondering if the ferry actually starts a food service on their property, it would pretty much put the Cove restaurant out of business. So they were looking for some sort of a way of ensuring that's not going to happen in the near future. There was a lot of discussion about whether it was their place to make a recommendation or not, but I guess they did anyways. And the other part was there used to be parking out in front of the Cove restaurant on Modi right away, but Modi give the right of way to the ferry for parking, and so in effect eliminated the public parking from in front of the Cove restaurant, which was a concern. They were trying to figure out how they could get parking back again. So those were the two issues.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else anybody would like to bring up from APC minutes? Director Ties has brought to my attention that we perhaps did not receive all reports after moving from the delegation or delegations. I just wanted to confirm with Autumn if we did indeed receive all reports.
Thank you, Chair. I don't recall a recommendation to that effect, but as a standard, we usually have that in the minutes with each of the staff report recommendations.
Director Pratt?
I'd just like to, I was just going to say what Autumn had to say, that the reports are fine. However, we did not receive the delegation materials, nor have we received the correspondence, but all of the recommendations or all the reports have that piece already covered off in the recommendations.
Fair enough. Okay, then a motion to receive delegations and correspondence, since I believe that's what's outstanding. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Yeah, any last comments on APC minutes? There wasn't anything in there that flagged for me, but no. Okay, moving on to communications. Annex O, a letter from Tom Bailey regarding the industrial and commercial use of the Cooper's Green recreational boat launch. Director Pratt.
Thank you. I'm going to speak, I'm going to try and keep my comments brief, but I will give the rest of the directors a bit of a heads up that this email or this piece of correspondence has precipitated a plethora of additional correspondence. I actually started my own folder on my email, and in the last about 24 hours have received close to 60 emails from separate individuals on this subject. So that'll be coming in the weekly correspondence to all directors. There's a lot of angst around the Cooper's Green boat launch on both sides of the issue, from mainland residents as well as from island residents. Having a boat launch is fundamental for any island residents to support island life. And then, but also on the other side, there's some concern about the commercial use of the recreational boat launch at Cooper's Green. So, so this is a larger issue from the within the community. I will be hosting a community conversation on this, and we'll be discussing further with staff and with directors on the historical nature of this. This isn't the first time this has come up. This came up in reading through past historical reports and everything. This about, I guess, probably about 4 years ago or so, is part of the conversation about the boat launch is partially what precipitated the Cooper's Green revitalization plan. And I know GM Hall could speak more to that. That in generalities, and but it's an ongoing issue, so that hasn't gone away yet.
But you are going to be hosting a community conversation, hopefully between island residents and some mainland residents and some commercial users of the ramp to.
Yes, and along with staff support, if based on their availability as well. And there's, I mean, even this morning, and I will note that I actually spoke with the barge operator this morning, and it's in the photo that's in the package of the children that are playing in front of the barge. Those are actually the children of the barge operator. So, so just as perspective. But there's a lot of issues around this, and because tides are so crucial for delivering product to the island, or whether it be for personal use, it's that's why Cooper's Green is used quite a bit. There's not, we have a lack of commercial boat launch on the outside of the Sunshine Coast. I've spoken with Director Seegers as this in her role as mayor. I know. Chief Paul and I have talked very briefly about this probably sometime last year, I think, and there's definitely a need for more commercial use on the outside of the Sechelt Peninsula, especially in this area to help support islanders. So I'd be happy to hear what any other directors have to say as well.
Director Ties.
Thank you. And I, from my knowledge, apparently this the restriction to have it recreation only is a provincial mandate because it is I believe a provincial foreshore license, and they require that is recreational only, and it will only ever be that. So that, I guess, begs the question as well. So that's one problem, and then the other problem is that even if somebody were to turn a blind eye to it, weight restrictions and moving heavy stuff will certainly cause damage to the ramp, and so I think a different solution does need to be found in some way or another. Because otherwise, the infrastructure there is certainly not built to take things like cement trucks, which was described in the letter.
Director Pratt, did you want to address that, or were you hand up about something else?
No, I'm actually, I'd like to address that because the piece about the provincial mandate. I had a conversation with Dan Rogers of the of Islands Trust last night, and he said that at one point it sounded like the province might be open to actually having some commercial use in that area. But he's trying to find me the information that he had from last time around, because of course he was at the table or he was part of the conversation the last time it happened at the elected level, and he has a couple of contacts that he's forwarded me, so we're continuing that conversation. So there's been more information that's come in to me that I wasn't even aware of before, but there might be an opening there within the province as well. So
okay, Director McMahon.
This is a nice meaty issue, but I don't want to get into it right now. My question is a process question. So you're going to have a public meeting on this subject. Then presumably it's going to come back to the board with some request for action. Is that the next step?
Speaking to me directly, I'm assuming Director McMahon. Well, I'd already planned on doing the public engagement with my community on this before this ended up on our PCD agenda, and it's because it's something that has surfaced since we were first elected in 2018. So yeah, so once we get some, I'll speak with staff and see what's maybe the best step after that, but definitely hearing more of getting everybody essentially in the same room so we can hear all of the issues first before we make any further recommendations or do any staff report, I think.
Okay, Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 222, right at the top, Article 2.1 is amended, and this is a question to staff. It says, we grant you a license of occupation of the land for public swimming and recreational boating purposes as set out in the management plan. You acknowledge this license of occupation does not grant you exclusive use and occupancy of the land. So given we don't have exclusive use of that, does that mean that under this license, or under the use, I guess, of the province, that others can use it for commercial or industrial uses? Because we don't have exclusive use. Do we know what the limitation of this agreement is?
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff have, over the years, staff have made a number of inquiries about both the interpretation of the purpose of the license and the limits of the scope of that description, and also what that non-exclusive use means. And I'll just say that the answers that we have received have not provided a great degree of clarity. We have been inspected by the province as to whether we're meeting our license, and found that we are not in contravention of the license. But that's not to say, obviously, that there aren't issues associated with the ramp. And so as part of staff support for the director's proposed process, this is the type of information that staff could bring forward in a comprehensive way to help inform the conversation. And if we identify that there are areas where we need more information, we can engage with the province as our landlord there. Thank you.
All right, Director Lee.
Yeah, I got this thing working again. First off, the launching ramp at Madeira Park is used quite heavily by commercial traffic, including gravel trucks and cement trucks. Mostly they're heading up to, of course, they're heading to Nelson Island for our area. I guess a person could load and go down to Thornby from there, but it's quite a long ways. I can see why they'd want to go straight in. But that leads me to believe there must be a way of making commercial traffic on a launching ramp legally permissible. But I'm not sure how it is, and I think Ian just asked the question. I think the first question is, do we want it to include commercial? And then the second question is, can it be commercial? So I think Laurie's got her the right way around there, and I'm sure glad it's her issue and not mine. I do note that with my Harbor Authority hat on, we have a lot of traffic at the Secret Cove government dock. That's parking issues and all that stuff, but they got to get out to that island somehow, and I think it's part of our job to make sure that they can. So those are my comments.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a good project to work through. I was just, back in 2015, there was a public consultation from the SCRD, the boat launch review thing. So I just want to separate out the difference between the license and the infrastructure. So the infrastructure, the actual concrete ramp, is it an SCRD asset to begin with? I'm going to draw a comparison to Halkett Bay, which SCRD has a facility, and there is a concrete ramp which was placed by a barging company, private. Apparently there's no permits. It was just in the dark of night, there was a concrete ramp appeared overnight, and that's where so is this chunk of concrete an asset which the SCRD could restrict people from using it, because you can use it for whatever purposes the area, but people come for the ramp, but the license is a broader area. So it's about the concrete, I think, that we're really talking about. So can staff, and this will probably go into the public discourse that Director Chair Pratt is going to be working on, but who actually owns the concrete?
GM Hall.
Thank you for the question. And this would be a good example of a question that if staff were to produce frequently asked questions to inform a conversation, be excellent information to include. The short answer is that this is a provincial piece of infrastructure that we hold a license to, and our responsibilities for the infrastructure are spelled out in that license. Only one excerpt of which is included with the correspondence. But in general, maintenance of the infrastructure falls to the regional district, and the committee will recall that some routine maintenance with concrete repairs is included in the 2020 annual budget to address some of the issues that are mentioned in the correspondence. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
I will observe that not only is the foreshore the area where the ocean meets the land and overlaps, it is the area where every blasted government jurisdiction seems to overlap as well. And fun issues. So I imagine we're not the only jurisdiction struggling with the issue of ramps. So I would be interested if there's any ramps in rural areas in other parts of AVICC that are, wrestling with the same problem, and whether they've found any solutions.
Director Pratt.
Thank you. So I'm just going to ask then, are we looking to direct staff at this time, or do we need a motion for staff to support a public meeting with me, or is that necessary at this time? If I'll look to staff to maybe answer that, GM Hall or CAO McKinley.
GM Hall.
A motion providing direction to staff would be appreciated and helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Director Pratt, are you making a motion there?
I guess my preference would be for staff to support. a public engagement session within Area B in regards to the Cooper's Green ramp. Is that sufficient?
Okay, I get a nod from Mr. Hall and a seconder from Director McMahon. Director Seegers, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, please. I'm just wondering, I mean, if looking at direction going forward, part of it, staff need to get some more information. Do we want staff to get that information and bring it back first? Or is it just going to this meeting, staff there as support, but only to hear questions and concerns from the public? Because at this point, it sounds like staff still need to find some more information to be able to answer any of the questions that the public will bring forward. So I think if you're going to go forward and do a public engagement session at this time with staff support, it would have to be very clear to the public that this is for for them to bring forward their questions and concerns only, and that those would be taken away, and not to have staff have to have the answers now, because they don't. Right. So I think we need to be clear about how that happens.
Okay. Director Hiltz.
I think I'm running on the same theme as Director Seegers, and it's kind of a phased approach. And I did hear GM Hall talk about an FAQ on these items, and whether that's the first step for staff to do is to generate that leading into some kind of a public dialogue process. So yeah, I'm cart before the horse, get the facts first, and that's kind of where phased approach.
Director Pratt.
I'd be happy with the FAQ. I don't want to leave an FAQ till after a public information meeting or a public engagement session, because frankly, it's like living in a very boiling pot that is that I'm right in the middle of and is boiling dry at the moment, or having more water poured in, however you want to look at that as an analogy. It's a lot of angst from the island communities, and it's a lot of angst for the mainlanders who are watching this and are distressed about it. So I would prefer to have an engagement session sooner rather than later.
Director Seegers, did you want to follow up on that, or can I go to Director Lee?
No, yeah, I'd like to follow up on that. So I guess I'm not clear with Director Pratt. If we're just saying going ahead with a public engagement session at this point, we haven't actually given staff direction to prepare any of that information. So it might be that the recommendation that's on the floor could be modified, that staff, the timing be set up such that staff have an opportunity to do the research and put together a frequently asked question handout prior to the public engagement session.
Big thumbs up from the CAO on that one, apparently. That sounds like an amendment. Did you want to make that amendment, Director Seegers?
I don't know if I can.
That's a good question.
This is a rural planning issue, so it would probably have to come from a rural director.
Director Lee.
I wasn't proposing to try to put that motion together. I'd let, looks like Donna's willing to do that though, so.
Okay, Director McMahon, a motion from you?
Yes, what Director Seegers said. Can we, all right, that's mean. I'm sorry, I have lost track of what the motion on the floor was, but we need to add the part about staff preparing an FAQ or
prior to.
How about background material prior to? I'll make that amendment motion.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Director Hiltz. Director Lee, you have your hand up.
Yes. I'm in favor of doing some research on the whole issue of launching ramps and including how to expand them or create them as necessary. We don't have enough access to the water here on the Sunshine Coast, so if this is the one that we use to figure out how to do it, then yeah, I'm all for this thing. I'd like to see, though, what Director Pratt has to say about the amendment. She didn't appear to be that eager, so I'd like to hear from her if I could.
Director Pratt.
The amendment works for me. I just need to move this. I just want to be, I was prepared to move this forward without staff support if needed. Like with the public engagement session, I'd already started feelers out with the community. So having staff support just will help make it more successful. So, and seeing that the CAO and I'm sure GM Hall would like an opportunity to prepare for that, that works for me. So I'm happy to call the question on the amendment. Let's move this forward and just get her done.
Director McMahon, do you need to speak to the amendment?
I just wanted to say that when I say background material, I don't mean for staff to find all the answers, but probably dust off some existing reports, and just because obviously this has come before the board numerous times previously, so at least we'll have some background.
All right. No more hands up. Nobody raise your hands. We're good. Going to call
the CAO. The CAO.
Sorry, I was just going to say we're happy to provide some supporting background materials and provide some support to Chair Pratt during the public engagement session.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Rural planning. All right, that amendment's carried. Are we clear on what we're voting on for the motion as amended? Would anybody like to hear it read back?
I'd sure like to hear it read back. Thank you.
Okay, Autumn, can you read that back for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. I have that staff research and prepare background material prior to a public engagement session in Electoral Area B with respect to the Cooper's Green recreational boat launch.
Okay. Director Pratt?
Now, I hate to do this, but based on the timeliness of this, I'm wondering about the potential of moving it to board this afternoon. I'm recognizing that our planning staff has a very large workload, but this is it's a powder keg right now. I'm really mixing my metaphors between the boiling pot and the powder keg, but next it'll be tarred and feathered chair or Area B director being run out of town. I don't know. But I'll just ask staff about, is it about moving it to board this afternoon, or is that sufficient enough to get started on a few things without?
CAO McKinley?
Yes, thank you, Chair Pratt. Recognizing that typically we would try to avoid moving things directly to board from these meetings, staff are happy to have this particular issue moved directly to board, recognizing it is an important issue that's bubbling or simmering away, and we can accommodate that, no problem.
Director Pratt.
Then I'd like to make that as an amendment, please, that it be added to board this afternoon, please.
Seconded by Director Hiltz. All those in favor of that amendment? That's carried. Okay. Motion as amended. Everybody understand what they're voting on? Yes. All those in favor? Okay. That's carried as well. Thank you for that. Thank you for the residents for bringing their concerns forward, and for staff for trying to help inform and educate and accommodate. That was it for communications. We have no new business. However, we do have an in-camera session. So can I ask for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 90, 1A and 2B of the community charter, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality, and the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. Just before we go in camera, though, do we have any questions from the gallery?
Thank you, Chair. Although there were some people in the gallery towards the beginning of the meeting, it is currently empty and there are no questions.
I shed one tear for our empty gallery. Do we want to take a 5-minute break before we do the in-camera session? All right, that concludes our in-camera portion of our meeting, and we have no further items on our agenda, so I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Great, thank you very much. We'll see everybody at 1:30.